All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the today's town hall meeting with POS. Today we welcome SportGait. Special thanks for Chris, the president of the company, to join us. Dr. Len Lecci, Scott Brittsan, director of development, and Kelly Dugan from SportGait. As you know, SportGait is our partner in providing concussion information and baseline testing. And tonight we want to learn a little bit more about the technology and the improvements they have added just recently. I will make it short in the beginning. I will see you back in the end of the presentation, and I'm turning this over to you, Scott.
Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for taking time out of your evening to join us. We'll make this as quick as painless as possible for you, but a lot of information we do want to relay to you, and some exciting things happening here at SportGait. So we were just introduced, but just to reiterate, my name is Scott Brittsan, and I've had the sports development portion for SportGait. And just a little bit about my background and what brought me into this position and to be a part of this team at SportGait was my whole background's in soccer, and at all different levels, most recently in the youth game, but I spent 18 years at the collegiate level here at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. I played there for 4 years and went back after a few years of graduation, and was in the college game for 18 years and transitioned into an executive director role for an organization here in North Carolina, where I was serving as the executive director. And that's where I was introduced to SportGait. And having been in the game for such a long time, the thing that drew me to SportGait was it was the first thing that I had come across in all those years. And as you can probably imagine, the early years, people were just putting their head in the sand. But as that began to evolve and people realized we've got to change what we do in terms of head injuries, and things began to evolve. At the collegiate level, it was one thing, because the medical staff that's there overseeing us day in and day out are a little more, obviously much more hands-on, and that was a different animal. But when I got into the youth game, there were so many things that would come out that people were promoting and trying to push, and for the most part, everything I came across was more or less just a CYA. We're gonna shoot this over to you. You get this out to your membership, and they're gonna check that box, and we're gonna move forward. Whereas SportGait, and what you'll learn tonight is it's a technology. It's a platform, and much smarter people than I are going to explain that to you. But it's ever evolving. You're going to find from our team that we're always in search of the best science, and we're also in search of making that science applicable to the youth sports market. So something that can actually help for the way that the youth sports world is aligned. And I was just so impressed with the business model that Chris and his team and everyone had put together with SportGait, that I wanted to be a part of it. And I think I tricked Chris in a weak moment into bringing me onto the team full time. So that's kind of my background and what brought me into it. So my whole focus is to work in the youth sports market, well, any sports market, but certainly in the youth market, and work with great organizations like you all to make sure that we're implementing our product in the best way and the most user-friendly way for you all. So if there's any questions on that side of it tonight, that's what I'm here for. I want to thank Tim. We talk to many executive directors of many states every single day, and I can just tell you in the short period of time that I've gotten to know Tim, he's one of the very few that, in my opinion, is in it for all the right reasons. He wants to do the right things for the membership of Pennsylvania West, and that's very evident in everything he does, not just in our niche, but in everything that he does. And that's a rarity. Some people, in my opinion, are looking for the path of least resistance, and Tim, one, he's always accessible, always gets back to you in rapid time, and is helpful, and just a great relationship and a great partner in this. And this relationship was in place before I got on board, but I do want to thank Tim and your entire staff, because you guys are on on the right path in everything that you do. And I'm sure the people that are with us this evening sense that, and that reflects in what you do every single day. So thanks for being here. Like I said, we've got a lot of neat information we want to share with you. If you've got questions, please pop them into the chat, or at the end, we'll have some time to answer those as well. But I did want to turn it over to Dr. Len Lecci, and Len heads all of the research for SportGait, which is phenomenal what he does. And I learn so much from him every time I hear him talk. So I'm excited to sit back and listen to Len for a little bit as well. But thanks so much, Len, for taking time this evening. And I'll turn it over to you, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Scott. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. So my job here is basically in about 10, 12 minutes, I'm going to try and convey to you, if you will, the science behind concussion assessment. Not just what we're doing, but more broadly speaking as well, so that basically you're sort of up to speed. And my goal is to try to make this as easily digestible as possible. I think we're going to have some slides up to facilitate that. There's some of our slides. So just as an overview, I do want to tell you that when we talk about concussion, and when we began looking at this, I'm a professor at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I've been doing assessment of cognitive abilities my entire career, my entire life. And one of the things is not just, so as I speak to you, I don't want you to just think, oh, this is what Dr. Lecci said. I want you to understand that one of the things that's really important is that we tie into the literature. There's no sense reinventing the wheel. The literature has been doing for the last couple of decades a great job of vetting and advancing our understanding of concussions. And one of the first things that's very clear in the literature is that there's a general consensus on what it is that we should be measuring when we're talking about the consequences of concussion. So whether it's in a screening context or a return to diagnostic context or a return to play context, there's a pretty broad agreement that there's two broad areas you want to assess. The first is neurocognitive abilities. Essentially, globally speaking and sort of everyday speak, it's the way your efficiency of your brain with respect to activities like processing speed, how quickly it does things, some working memory decisions, executive abilities, a whole bunch of different terms you'll see in the literature. But if you want to condense them down, it's how quickly your brain can engage in cognitive tasks. And I'll show you some examples of that. The other side of the coin that's also really important are neurobehavioral measures. And so these might be things like gait or balance. These are sort of the 1-2 punch when we think about concussions. And then in about the last decade, there's been sort of also an expanded interest on some of the mood consequences that are associated with concussion. So I think what you'll see is as you go through our battery that we've attempted to pay very close attention to all of these areas. And that's one of the things that we noticed, of course, when we look at the concussion assessments out there, is a lot of them tended to be unidimensional in their focus. So they might do something half decent, maybe in some cases, but not necessarily, but pretty much ignore a lot of the other areas, which is problematic because there's a lot of different types of concussion. And so if you're only focusing on one type, you're obviously going to be ignoring a lot of other ones. And when someone walks in the door, when your child has an incident, you don't know what type of concussion that they might have. So what you're seeing here on the screen is that we of course are drawing from the literature out there, and I'll summarize a few things in the coming slides. But I also wanted you to know that we're also very active in producing that science as well. So one of the first things we did was establish a research consortium. You're seeing some of the first partners that we are pairing with right now. So the University of North Carolina, Wilmington serves as the hub of that research consortium. So we do all the clearance for IRB, we train the other sites, and then they also collect data. University of North Florida was the first to come on board, University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, Marshall University. We have several clinical partners. One of the first was the New Hanover Regional Medical Center. And what we're able to do with this consortium is essentially to ask some of the research questions that still haven't been yet answered. So many questions are being addressed and answered in the literature, but there's a few that aren't. And so we can direct our resources to those. And you can see that we've actually already run over 58,000 subjects Actually, that number is probably outdated by now. That slide's a few weeks old. The data are coming in literally daily. And the reason we do this is because the only way you can stay on top of the curve in terms of what's the best thing going on is you have to be continuously investigating it and then as needed, adjusting it. So essentially it's sort of like when you're optimizing any system, you're taking information in, and if something truly is an improvement, then that's one of the changes we can make and push those things out to all of the people that are doing it. So it's sort of an ongoing quality control at a science level, if you will. We've already, even though we just started this consortium a few years ago, we already have several peer-reviewed studies, and I'll refer briefly to those. But the essence is they're telling us that the system that we put together works extraordinarily well, better than many of the other systems that have been out there for a while. And it's really not a big surprise. In fact, if we go on to the next slide, Chris, I'm going to walk you through exactly what the system is and why it is that it works. So what we decided to do was to actually go out there and identify what were the best instruments to measure those broad areas that I talked about before. And I should point out that we actually began with some of the instruments that are very commonly used in concussion assessments. But unfortunately, the scientific literature has not been very kind to many of those measures. And so those things that were specifically developed to assess concussion, unfortunately, have taken kind of a beating scientifically when you sort of see what they have accomplished or what they have attempted to do, that in fact, unfortunately, they don't do it very well. So we sort of took a slightly different track and decided that since we know what it is that has to be assessed, the approach we took was let's identify some measures that we know have already been established to assess those areas of functioning: balance, gait, neurocognitive abilities, and they do so in a very reliable, which basically means consistent way, meaning you administer the test, and if you give it again to the individual, for example, and no intervening event has occurred, that you would produce a consistent score. This is called test-retest reliability. Sort of like if you were to put on a blood pressure cuff and then you take it off and you take it again in 5 minutes, you would want those numbers, assuming, again, you were just sitting there not doing anything new in those 5 minutes, that those numbers should be pretty consistent. That's one of the basic properties of any good test. And so as we selected these tests, that was one critical starting point that all of these tests had to have. The second one was then they also had to relate to the thing that we're interested in this case, measuring certain elements of cognitive functioning, balance, gait, and then mood, you'll see as well. And then lastly, that they have great normative data. And by normative data, it means that your scores are being compared to a large number of representative number of individuals like you, corrected for age, gender, etc. And that way you can be confident as you're interpreting those scores. So let me tell you about that actual battery. The battery includes, first of all, pre-screening, in which we ask individuals the basic CDC symptoms of concussion. And we go through that along with a medical history. Now, this is the medical app that we put together. You're going to see that we have an abbreviated version for our baselines as well. And Chris will get into a little more detail on that. But you'll see the same elements in that as well. We then do a gait observation. You'll notice that the person walking is actually wearing sensors during this gait observation. And again, that's some of the new technology that we're bringing to the forefront in these assessments. The individuals undergo what's called the NIH 4-meter gait test. That's the National Institutes of Health 4-meter gait test. It's got excellent norms, great test-retest reliability. In fact, one of the strongest test-retest reliabilities out there. And it just involves people walking 4 meters. They do it twice. You take the fastest of those 2 times. And then again, you can do normative comparisons for age and gender and be able to show if someone is moving at the appropriate speed, because that is one of the things we notice is when concussions occur, you notice some slight subtle effects with respect to gait slowing. We also have individuals engage in the balance error scoring system called the BESS for short. Again, another test that's been out there for a long time. It involves 6 poses, 3 on a cushioned surface, 3 on a hard surface. And there's some in which your eyes are closed. The individual is noting any errors, and we take the total score for the balance error scoring system. And then lastly, we also measure neurocognitive abilities. And this is essentially what's called a go, no-go task. People are seeing a series of stimuli flashing on the screen at varying speeds. They're supposed to hit the key whenever they see certain stimuli and withhold a response when they don't see that stimulus, see other things. And it can record things like your processing speed, how quickly you respond, and the types of errors you make. For example, errors of commission when you hit it when you shouldn't, omission when you fail to hit it when you should have, and as well as looking at things like variability around those scores. This battery in its totality is something that we have put together because of the quality of each of these different individual assessments. And to illustrate that for you, if we can see the next slide, I mentioned the importance of tests having something as simple as good test-retest reliability, meaning when you give a test, that it essentially produces consistent scores over time. And what you're seeing here are some of the test-retest reliabilities published in the literature for the instruments that we've selected as part of this battery. Again, if you're, I'll just use the NIH gait test as an example. As I said, it's one of the most reliable instruments out there. And you can see that the solid line denotes what the score is, and then the dashed lines on either side are essentially the error. And there's error in any test, which means that if you were to give the test once and then give it again, you wouldn't expect to necessarily get the identical score. Okay, there'd be a little movement around it. But the test-retest reliability of the measure, in this case 0.97, 1.0 is as high as it gets, tells you then how much movement you would expect around that solid line if you were to do this sort of repeatedly over time. And so the reason it's important for those dashed lines to actually be pretty close to that solid line is because then it allows you to make more meaningful interpretations when scores change. So you'll notice in this example, the green dots are individuals of a population who are concussed. The blue dots, the circles, are individuals who are non-concussed. And you can see that if you sort of took the average point in that group and the error bars, the dashed lines around it, that you're not necessarily spilling over into between the concussed and non-concussed. In other words, when someone's tested multiple times, you can be certain that their scores will vary a little bit, but not so much that you start being unsure if the person has a concussion or not. Now, I want to contrast this with the next slide, which is where you'll see the typical test-retest reliabilities of some widely used tests. Remember at the beginning, I said we start off by saying, well, maybe we'll just adopt some of the tests that have been developed to assess concussion. The reason we didn't go that route is because two of the more commonly used tests, the SCAT and IMPACT, have actually quite horrendous test-retest reliability figures. So these are from the published literature. This isn't research we've done. This is research we've reviewed. So if you take a look just as an illustration at IMPACT, look at those same error bars. You see the solid line down the middle. This is now with a test-retest reliability of 0.22. And look at where the dashed lines go, how far they go. What that means is that when you test someone and then you go to test someone the next time, their score could naturally fall anywhere between those two dashed lines. And all you would say is you would expect that based on the poor test-retest reliability of that measure. In other words, if you tested someone, imagine post-incident, and then again, let's say as you're doing return to play, their scores could vary by that much, and you would just say, well, that's probably the instrument. In other words, you'd have no way of telling the difference if someone was, for example, in the concussed category or not in the concussed category, because their scores are wildly varying. Imagine, let me go back to that blood pressure cuff. Imagine if just sitting there, you put on a blood pressure cuff and, you get 120/80, you wait 5 minutes, you try it again, and you get 240/120, and you take it again and you get 30/10. Now, clearly, that's a problem with the instrument. It's not giving you consistent scores over time. There would be no way to know if your blood pressure was actually changing because the instrument is not able to detect it because it shows too much error between each administration. And that's what happens with these tests, which is why we decided that wasn't the route to go. And so we would pick specifically tests that provide good test-retest reliability. And again, we see this in tons of published studies that sort of essentially critique these tests and ultimately argue we probably shouldn't be using them. Let's go to the next slide. Now, I mentioned that this was our review of the literature, and we spent a fair amount of time putting that battery together. But to give you a sense that this isn't just our conclusion, in December of 2019, well, actually in the year preceding that, but it ended in December 2019. We were awarded an open bid contract with the third largest health hospital system in the United States. And over the course of the year leading up to that decision, it was an open competition between anyone and everyone who does concussion assessments. And you can see a lot of the people who were competing for that contract in this group. It includes SCAT and Impact that I referred to, and many other names that you might recognize if you're familiar with the field. And they, a scientific panel that represented this large hospital system made the decision to go with SportGait as their preferred vendor for this assessment. And it's exactly for the reasons that I just showed you. In fact, here you just sort of see one of the ways, or two of the ways, in fact, we sort of stand out from a lot of other measures. I mentioned that it's comprehensive. It assesses a lot of different areas. Many of these things are what we call one-point solutions. They measure just one area. They ignore a lot of areas. The other thing I just talked about was the reliability of the instrument. Again, many of these instruments, while they measure some area, but they're not necessarily especially consistent in producing scores. They're not particularly reliable. So the fact that we can do both of these things allows us essentially to have a superior method. Go ahead to the next slide, Chris. Okay. So one of the things that I do want to emphasize and what's critical in this process is this assessment system, if you will, as Scott mentioned, is a battery, and therefore it is something that we can sort of evolve over time, meaning it's something that we continue to investigate as things improve. We tweak the system. You're going to hear about a few of those tweaks. I will foreshadow one of them, which is we just completed a rather large study with almost 1,000 subjects, looking at them intensively. And what we found is that the cognitive test I told you about, which is called the Connors Continuous Performance Test, the 3rd edition, we've actually determined that the half Connors, meaning taking the first half of the test, which only takes about 7.5 minutes as opposed to 15, works just as well, or actually even a little better than the full test. So this is one of the consequences of us doing this research, is that we're saying, hey, look, we can produce something that's just as good, and we can do it in a much more efficient way. And that's one aspect of the research that we're doing. As I mentioned, we're putting together a battery for medical facilities, but there's also something that gets used and will be of greater interest to many of you on this call, that's used for the general public for when we're doing things like baseline assessments. And when we're doing those baseline assessments, I know it's not our dog because we don't have one, so. But when we're doing these baseline assessments, you'll see that we meet all of those same criteria that I discussed earlier, because again, we want to take those medical grade quality assessments and essentially allow the public to use them. And so you'll see here that there are different apps as they appear, and this is a good place for me to hand off the baton to Chris, who will tell you a little bit about the offering that is used for the public.
Great, thank you, Len. And yes, those were both my dogs. So so as Len was saying, we built the system as a platform, and so we can always, it's flexible and extensible. And part of that platform are the apps that you're looking at the bottom of this. So the top is actually the results that you would see if you were to take a test. And this is the medical battery. So because we get the question quite a bit, because the apps that we're giving to the clubs and to the parents are free. Okay, so everybody always asks us, how do you make your money? Well, we license the medical app that Len just went over to the medical facilities, so then we could provide as much as we can for free to the general public and to the sports organizations. But if you can see in the output here, which I think is a pretty, it's an elegant output, you see the green, the yellow, and red. Right. And when you take, and that's your normative data. So if you didn't even have a baseline, you can still go to one of our clinics and they'll have empirical information to base their decision. So if you look at this, this is actual data. And this is the number one here. This is the first time that post-incident, you see everything's in the red. And then this was 2 weeks later, you start seeing things are moving to the yellow. And then finally things got to the green. So you can see that nice progression of recovery, which is really nice too. So when, as a parent, and if you're going through this, you can see if your child is progressing or not. But what I wanted to talk to you today is about the bottom part here, which all integrates into the medical app so it can help doctors with their clinical decisions. And before I say anything, I should just get this out of the way as well. We are HIPAA compliant. We have third-party auditors for all cybersecurity. We are SOC 2 Type 2 audited. Last year, we had 2 audits without any issues at all for our cybersecurity, and we take data and privacy extremely serious. And so what you're looking at here is an athletic trainer app. So if you're working, some of the bigger clubs have athletic trainers, or a lot of times ODP has athletic trainers, or schools and so forth. So we have an app that's a little bit more sophisticated for sideline assessments, and it also has a tremendous way to document how you're recovering on a daily basis. You know, does your athlete, how's their hydration, how's their sleep, how's their heart rate variability, all sorts of things. So when you're working with the athletic trainer, it is really sophisticated on the recovery side as well. But the safety program, which I'm about to go over, is really a combination of these two over here, right? It's the parents will have an app, and then you also have the sports organizations. For the sport organization, what we provide at no cost is a way for them to stay in compliance with the state laws. So right now, the interscholastic state laws, every state has a different variation of it, but these 3 elements are all the same, right? It's educate and validate. You must give all the players and the guardians the concussion education, and they must sign off on it before the season begins. The next is recognize or remove. Recognize that there is an issue, a potential head injury, and you must pull them out. They can't go back in until at least 24 hours. That time period is different per state, and return by certified by a medical professional to do a certified return to play. And that medical professional is defined differently in each state. And I'm sure you all know your interscholastic laws. But the one thing, as you look at the states here, you start seeing that there's 25 states plus DC that have already, for their recreational programs, have adopted their interscholastic laws. And we believe all of them is going to happen. And we also believe that if you're in a we call it compliant state, where your rec leagues, you play in other places. Because I know my daughter actually played PA West 2 years ago, and we met in Virginia to play. So I know we were out of compliance and so forth. So what we're trying to do is provide at no cost, right? So we believe that this is a vital thing. I think every parent needs to have this education because it's important. Most people don't know what to do. There's a lot of noise, a lot of confusion when it comes to concussion. So it's nice to have this out there. And what we have in that mobile app for the parents is we're starting to empower the parents to make informed decisions. And sometimes that sounds a little bit scary, but they're not making return to play decisions. But basically, we're empowering them. Where do I take my child? Because so many times you're on a field and you have a coach who's maybe 24 years old, who's been great at soccer and is a history major, and then they're sitting there with their finger up trying to figure out what to do. So what our app does, it follows the CDC guidelines exactly, okay? And then it gives them, so if you, let's just say, you pull out somebody who has a potential head injury, any of the first 10 symptoms, if you click on it, it's going to say you need to go to the emergency room. And then the other 20, which I'll show you in a minute, says you need to go see a doctor. It's no longer an emergency, still urgent, but no longer an emergency. So that's what this app does, because not only we believe the concussion education is extremely important, but until the parent and your child is down on the ground, you're not going to remember, oh, what did paragraph 3 say in that education? You're going to just click, and we're going to walk you through what you should do at that point. And it gives a real level of comfort. And the other thing that we're doing too is through that workflow, soon as that happens, a notification goes to the designated person at your club, says, okay, Johnny is now removed from play. And now you know that Johnny cannot come back until they have a note from the doc or whoever the medical provider is. So we're trying to complete that loop so there isn't anybody sidestepping what the regulations are for the safety of our children. So in the preseason, basically they get a link. They're going to click on it. It's going to have them sign into here, and it's going to say, okay, I need to sign the information sheet. If you're the parent, the guardian, you click here, and it comes in. Here's your actual education. It's the CDC education. If you have special education needs for your state, we could put that in there as well. And then you simply click, I've learned, I've received it, I understand it, and then you sign off. The nice thing is, it goes, you can't really see it, but it actually goes right onto the document itself, and we have this audit trail. So now if you're an organization, you say, on such and such date, I deliver this thing, Johnny and his parents have signed off on it and so forth. So they can't come back and say that they didn't get the education that was provided. When we look at some of the lawsuits that are out there, I think you're probably all familiar with the headband thing, but if you look at the actual claims, it was providing the education to the parents and the athletes. So this is it. It's very easy to do. You sign it, and then you have an audit trail. Hopefully you don't need it, but it's there if you have it. The next thing is, if there is an incident and you're a parent, because first of all, our expression at SportGait is life is a contact sport. And many of these incidents are going to happen just at home, right? Running around and falling down or slipping on, well, I can say it now, slipping on the ice. And so it's as simple as click evaluate. And from there, remember I was saying about the CDC symptoms? The first one's going to be this that pops up, and you go through this. You know, one of the big things that everybody looks at, look at the bottom one's one pupil larger than the other. You know, so any of these things here, you want to take them to the emergency room. And as soon as you hit save, it says you should, and it'll give you driving directions to the emergency room or a 911 button. But that it's important because your child's brain might be swelling or even bleeding. So you need to get to the emergency room. The next ones are, you know, what the parent evaluates and then what the athletes reports. And then the other nice thing about this, so you'll click on this and then it'll give you directions to a medical facility. First, we'll have the list of hours that are closest, but then after that, we have all the on-demand ones because we want you to get to a doctor, and whether it's our doctor or not. And the nice thing is, if it's our doctor, these symptoms that you take it off the sideline, they'll have a record of that when they start the evaluation. So then this is what it looks like afterwards. If you have one of the symptoms, you can say, hey, do you want to find a doctor? If yes, it's going to give you the list. These are our doctors here with phone numbers, driving directions, and here the nearby on-demand medicine. And then you have their hours, you have their phone, and then you get driving directions. This is really particularly important too, because a lot of your families travel. So now you're in a kind of an unknown area and you don't know where to go. So this will help people guide you to the right place. So after you do all of that, okay, and you go see the doctor, we have another level of security, but you're gonna be able to see your history and say, hey, you know, I want to see the results of the test. And then you're gonna go ahead after you put your extra pin in there and you'll be able to see the results. And at the end, hopefully they're all green like this, and you get a doctor's note. If you have a doctor's note and it's in our system, it automatically will go through and it will go to the club, and the club will then say, okay, Johnny can play. If not, because we don't want to limit it to just, you know, our doctors, because some people like, I mean, you have UPMC up there, and we're not part of UPMC, but so if you go there, they can sign off, they can take a picture and have an approval, they can submit it, and then at the club, you get an alert, hey, somebody's ready, you take a look at it, and then you can view this. And it's really important to view this because, you know, a lot of the soccer players, a lot of all sports, they just want to play, right? So now at least you know that this is a real doctor that signed off on it, and you have the record. And then if you see this here, I don't know if you can see it, hopefully it's big enough, you hit approve, and then depending on how you want to do it, it's going to send a note to the coach and to the parent or whoever else you think needs to be notified. So what we're trying to do is complete that loop over there to try to keep clubs out of trouble and keep the kids as safe as possible. So that's the safety program. So obviously this year, 2020, it's been a difficult year for everybody. We've seen a lot of participation down, especially at the rec level. We've seen, I think at the competitive level, they've been maintaining their membership, but at the rec level it's been down because a lot of people are talking about, hey, you know, I just want my kid to get the team experience and exercise, but with COVID, it's pretty scary. I don't really want them to go out there and risk it. It's not like they're trying to become a professional soccer player or whatever. So we've seen through conversations a lot of drop off at the rec levels. And so what we've done to help with player safety is we created a COVID return to play app that's part of the app and is still free. So we've done this, and basically what it is, it's going to give you all the safety guidelines about washing your hands, social distancing, wearing masks, and all that stuff. So I know it's embedded in probably in everybody's brain, but it's nice to have, once again, something right on your phone. But the next thing is you go in, and if you have two children, you select your child, and you see one's already done their, we'll call it a wellness check, the other one has not. And you go through it, and it's as simple as this. You go in the past 14 days, have you tested positive for COVID-19? Yes, no. And it's 3 screens. The next one is, in the past 14 days, have you been directly exposed to anybody tested positive COVID-19? Yes or no? And then it's a fever above 100.4, yes, no, cough, or any of these symptoms. And once again, this is very flexible. So however you want to make your rules, your regulations, some organizations, like we're doing a lot of hockey, we're doing North Carolina ODP, and a few other states. We're hoping to be rolling out with PA West ODP as well. But some people say, all right, if you have a fever, you're not coming out. So if you check no there, then you failed the test. I hate to say failed the test, but other people are saying you need one symptom with the fever. The other one's saying you just need any 2 of these. So, but we can configure that any which way you want to run your organization. The other thing about it is we don't connect into any of the national databases or anything. So it's truly how you want to run it and so forth. But what we've seen too is we also have referees, and we also have the coaches take it. So now what we're seeing is, and we'd like to think it's from this, but we have seen changes with people using it, is their participation levels are going up. And because now parents are saying, okay, on the field, you know, somebody might have COVID, but at least I'm confident that everybody on this field does not have COVID symptoms. And I know that's assuring for everybody, for me, when I put my dad hat on, for sure. And then the nice thing is, depends on who you have. And we set up any which way you want. You can have the coaches have the real-time information, or you have, if you have athletic trainers, they can have it. So when they're looking at their phone, when people show up, they're going to say, okay, Casey Brown, you're good to go. Colby, nope, can't come on the field yet. Either go home or have your parents do this again. Or the bigger clubs, they might have them go through the process right then and there with a contact-less or contact-free thermometer as well. So there's just many different ways you can do this. And, you know, once again, this is free, right? So, and the people that are using it, it's just easy. So some people are using it before every practice. Other people are doing it before like weekend events. Some people are doing once a week. But it's as simple as a link comes out, you click on the link, and they go through those 3 screens. So that's our COVID return to play as well. Same app, same everything. What I'd like to do is at this stage, I would like to open up to questions and answers. We do have a lot of things that are coming down the pipeline, and I don't want to run over my time, but some of the things that we're coming out with, I'll give you one sneak peek because I think it's very important, is the stress, anxiety, depression screener. And this is real important, especially with the years now, it's going to be plural, of COVID. There's some people that, and we see it in our athletes right now, that things are changing, right? Because some places you actually can play, other places you can't play. Some you get to play with a mask on. Some, and it's just they don't understand. Sometimes 1 week they're playing full contact, the next week you can only have 10 on the field. So it's really a lot of strain, especially for a lot of the athletes that just want to go out and play and practice playing soccer. And what we've done is what we've negotiated with Pearson Clinical Assessments over here is a special license for us to be able to deliver this. This is the most widely used English-speaking emotional screener that's out there, emotional behavioral screener. And so we'll be bringing that out a little bit later. If we do, since I negotiated the process, the parents would have to pay an extra for this, no cost to the club or anything. And this is optional, right? If they want to use it or not, but if they're concerned, and we'll get it at the lowest price possible. But it's very simple. It's 29 questions. It's, does your child worry about things that cannot be changed? Never, sometimes, often, so forth. And then there's a series of these questions. And at the end, you're going to get a score. And you're going to say, boy, you have an extremely elevated risk. Please contact a healthcare provider and so forth. Or the next level down is elevated, and then normal. And when we're saying normal, elevated, highly elevated, that's based on, and like our system as well, what we call norm data, what the national average is within one standard deviation of the national average. That is what we consider norm. And then as you go farther away from norm is how things are measured. But today's offering is the COVID return to play and the concussion safety. And I'd be happy to take any questions from anybody.
If you have any questions, just unmute yourself and ask the question that's on your mind, anything.
Did I put everybody to sleep? Let's go. I have that effect at home too.
Yeah, yeah. Look at it positive.
I had a quick question.
Certainly.
Thanks, first of all, for the presentation. Appreciate it. Safety is absolutely everyone's top priority. So we appreciate the education. The question that I had with the app, is it something that the clubs all sign on for? So for instance, the COVID-19 protocol, we were just doing a paper sign off, but having an electronic ability to record that is certainly something that's appealing. Is that something where the club signs on and then everyone has access in the club, or every individual person has to sign on?
Yes, that's a great question. And on my screen right in the middle is Kelly Dugan. And what she does is she works with the individual clubs and helps you set it up, and also sets up how you want to run this. Meaning, do you want, if it's just a fever or however you want to do this, we set up that protocol for you, and then also who can see the information, right? So if it's a coach or an athletic trainer, and so forth. So she will walk you through the whole process, and it's very easy. So it's a matter of uploading a roster through our secure portal, and then and it's basically names and teams, and then we need coaches as well. And then once that's in there, then we would ask you how frequently you want this to go out. Is it before every practice? And what ends up happening is that email goes out with the link. They just click on the link. It goes straight to those 3 questions, or those 3 pages of questions.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Anybody else with questions and comments?
Hey, Chris, this is Tim. Just to for clarity, when you sign up for the COVID-19, you're also essentially setting yourself up to have the concussion stuff available to your parents as well, correct?
Absolutely. It's the same process. So once it's in there, we could turn on one or turn on both. And we obviously, I mean, we recommend obviously the COVID return to play, but we also, the concussion education is such a big deal that a club has done that. And because we see, I mean, we're all over the country and we're looking at things, and we see so many times, you have some of the parents will say are very, have very high hopes for their children. And so what they will do is they go straight to the coach, say, oh yeah, Johnny's seen a doctor, he's okay. And so what we're hoping to do is not let that happen, and so forth, and protect the children.
Can you talk a little bit about the testing portion and how that works?
Sure. So like the baseline testing?
Yes, please.
Great. So before season, what we would do is we would arrange with so what we'd like to do is when we sign up a club, then we'd like to go ahead and try to get some baseline testing for the club. So what we would do is ask you if you're working with a medical provider, so that we can go ahead and partner with them. And if not, if you could just kind of give us the lay of the land, who's around your area, we'll help secure that. And a lot of times when we secure a medical partner, they usually become advertising partners for you. And so we've seen that quite a bit, and it's nice. And then what we'll end up doing is we'll schedule a time, and we can go ahead and set up baselines. And with baselines now, we became very efficient at that. Thanks to Dr. Lecci and his team, we've been able to shorten the battery quite a bit. And we're able to now, depending on the number of computers and the layout and so forth, and whatever your COVID rules are, how many people are allowed in the room, we can do, let's just say 10 at a time on the neurocognitive. And then once you're done with that, then they would walk out, and then we would go ahead and do one walking test, walk down, turn around, and walk back, and then they're off and running. So we can do, let's just say it's 10 computers. We do 10 every half an hour. It really takes about 20 minutes with the walking and the communication and so forth, but then we leave it extra time for any stragglers, and also to clean off all the computers for the next, or disinfectant for the next people. And so we do that. And the nice thing is, then if you saw that picture, if you can remember the green, the yellow, and red, there is I'll actually go back to that. Can you see that now, or am I not sharing? I'm not sharing. Where am I? Can you see that, or no?
I can't see it, Chris.
Okay. So let me just do a real quick share again.
While you're finding that, Chris, just to, if there's anybody on here that's in that boat, that does need for us to come in and maybe hook you up with a medical provider, we're happy to do that. If you have one in place, we're not trying to replace those folks. If there's a good relationship there, we just simply want to go in and enhance that, which we found is the medical providers are very open to, because as it is, the relationship may be a sponsorship, what have you, but by virtue of developing this relationship, it's now allowing them some billable hours, and they're quite open to that, as you can imagine. So it just kind of enhances any relationship that you may have. So please feel free to reach out to us if that's something we can help you with. Sorry, Chris.
No, that's a good point. And next week, is it next weekend or the weekend after, we're doing a baseline for, they were already sponsors, with ortho sponsors with the club, and now we just augmented that capabilities with adding concussion to it, and now we're baselining their whole entire organization. So So it's a nice way to really strengthen a relationship or create a new one. So what I wanted to show you here on the results real quickly, if you can see, hopefully you can see this. You see the green, the yellow, and the red. That's that normative data that's on average by your age and your gender. But you can kind of see this black line, a black line here. That was actually their baseline. So by doing this baseline, say like on our neuropsych test, they will have it. So when they go and see the doctor after taking this, the doctor knows this is what their baseline is. Yes, this is the norm, but they're doing pretty well in their hit reaction time and so forth. So then they know if there is an incident that they should be going not just back to the norm, but back to their baseline. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Great. All right. Sure, there's another question in there. Ask a science question. Dr. Lecci's smart. I can't answer those.
I have to agree. There has to be a question out there. So actually, the program that you're providing to is not just for soccer or sports related activities. It's also for teenagers running into doors or bicycling against a tree.
Yeah,
it's equally of equal importance to the parent. I wanted to say.
That's right, and also so you know, back to that normative data, we're normed from 5 to 85 years old, age and gender. So you know, if we count it, we focus on sports, all our marketing effort and so forth. But if we count the number of tests, post-concussive tests, it's actually from occupational health, slip, trips, and falls at work.
If I could just jump in and note that you know, the biggest risk for concussion is everyday life. It's not the events that occur in sports, even though they certainly get a disproportionate amount of the attention. You can imagine car accidents, all kinds of things, even relatively minor fender benders can be things that can contribute, trips, falls, etc. So again, when you have this system on your phone, for example, for baselines, while it might be geared towards, you know, within the context of these sports teams, there's nothing that would prevent a parent from taking it themselves if they wanted to, or anything of that nature. So it is, you know, obviously, when it's there, we'd like people to make full use of it and to help inform their safety, not just for their kids on the field, but in everyday life.
Much that is good stuff. Yeah, proud to have you, and pausing for one moment to see if there's any further questions. Please unmute yourself and let us know what's on your mind. I think you did a good presentation. There's no further questions, I guess. So I really do appreciate your time tonight. We are glad to call you partners of ours. Appreciate the time, and we will continue our town hall meetings. We have good stuff coming up with Soccer Connect, which is our online provider, also known as Affinity, which will be coming up soon with good updates, safe sport, new requirements and changes. We will discuss our strategic plan. We will discuss, and another highlight is the 9 legal duties of a coach. Maybe we should add you guys as a number 10 here. So again, I appreciate your time. I wish you well. Please stay safe, and I hope to meet you in person sometime. So thank you very much, and good night, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it. Appreciate your partnership. And thank you, Tim, as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.